1867 sports show tonight. It's going to be a real battle of fortitude to see if Kirkwood can get through it tonight. He's
Good luck.
battling more than a few little germs over there at the family house, eh, bud?
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting night tonight. So good luck to everybody. I hope that I don't blow out your eardrums with my incessant coughing. But yeah, just happy to be here, man. Happy to be here. Committed to the Wednesday release of the show.
There you
For
go.
anyone who just wants to question this show's dedication, this is it right here.
There you go. Kirkwood's trying to keep our Iron Man streak going here, much to his own personal detriment. But, golf clap to you for gutting it out tonight. There we go. Well done. At least for the viewers, though, it's kind of nice that we are hidden behind a screen at this point. They don't need to run any kind of risk of picking up whatever is coming out of your body at this point.
Yeah, because they definitely be getting something. I mean, it's made its way through our house. As I was telling you before, both the kids had it, and as luck would chance. With every parent, your kids have it for a day, and what is it? The rule of six. Kids have it for a day, and you've got it for six. So,
Yeah. Well,
yeah,
parents just age in dog years, right? So
pretty
whatever the kids
much.
have there, multiply that by a dog year, and that's
Yeah,
how long you'll be out of commission for.
good. Yeah, good to know. But
Yeah.
anyways, no, we're all good. We're all good. But before we get started, just want to say again, thanks to our fantastic guests last week from the movie Friday Night Sex Scandal, Matthew Bennett and Noah Demel. Obviously, the premiere was on Saturday, but unbeknownst to us, it was only in the U.S. So still waiting on the Canadian premiere to come up. But from what I'm hearing, Amazon Prime should be releasing it any day now. So for those of you anxious for the release in Canada, just putting that out there.
Yeah, heard through the grapevine, our VHS copy of the release is coming in the mail. Canada
It's on
Post
it.
just a little slow right now.
Yeah, it's on its way from Slovakia.
Yeah, there we go. But at the end of the day, we have a lot of sports to cover here, so we better get into it because I know that we've got only a limited number of words that you've got in your system before you'll be hacking up a lung on air. So
You're going to see the Kyle word meter just slowly going down as we continue the show. So yeah, let's get into it.
yeah. Well, we talked a lot of hockey last time we were out. We're going to flip over to the gridiron. Lots of happenings in the world of CFL. And one of them happening out west right now with the formerly known as the Eskimos, now known as the Elks. Edmonton is potentially looking at some ownership changes. So, what are your initial thoughts about some of the potential groups that have been rumored to be out there? There's a lot of NDAs that are, it's
Mm.
still kind of cloak and dagger. But from what you've heard, what kind of direction do you see this going in with the Elks?
Well, the biggest thing that people need to realize is that the Edmonton Football Club, formerly the Eskimos, now the Elks, has always been a publicly owned team.
Yeah.
So kind of like the Green Bay Packers in the NFL, they were owned by the city of Edmonton, right? So the interesting part about this is the first time in its history that this is now up for private sale, which I think can be a really good thing because you've seen the team struggle, let's say the last decade, with consistency in management, with consistency in coaching. And then you look at what's going on with their stadium. I mean, this is really what makes Edmonton kind of dive down to the bottom of like the in-game experience in regards to the CFL. Because they play in Commonwealth, which is a very old stadium in regards to professional sport venues. It's way too big for what they need. I mean, I think even if they were to average 30 to 40,000 people, it would still look like it's only half full.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that the in-game experience could potentially really benefit from having a private ownership group come in because I think they'd be more willing to invest in the actual grounds themselves.
Yeah.
So I think that's really the biggest thing that people could take away from this. And we've seen it with Ottawa, we've seen it with BC, we've seen it with Montreal recently. When you've got these ownership groups that are willing to invest in the grounds around the team, it really does make for a better experience, which again drives people into the door and revenue up. So I don't think we have to tell you about the recent success of Montreal because obviously they won the Grey Cup last year, large part because of the ownership changes and the money that they were investing into the program. BC, ever since it was taken on, from the Braley Group, they've done great things out there. They put some investment into the actual facility. There's more in-game experiences. There's more things pre-game, and that's what drives people down to the grounds, down to the game, down to view the product that you're putting on. So I think in Edmonton's case, the fact that they're exploring this and they're already into working with the Parkland Group, which is essentially the private CFL brokerage that kind of facilitates all of these different negotiations. So I think that the fact that they're already down that road with them, it bodes well. And for anyone who's saying, well, this is another case of the CFL getting away from its roots, well, it had to happen eventually. And at the end of the day, would you rather a team be in Edmonton and potentially have some changes, or would you rather the team just kind of dissolve because of the way they've always done things publicly?
Yeah. And you raise a good point there that before I get into my topics there, I really want to hammer home because the CFL, more than any other professional league that jumps to mind for me, is in between generations right now, right? You've
Yeah.
got those diehard purists who, oh, back in my day there, oh, yeah, we had two Rough Riders teams in the leagues. And, they're kind of stuck in their ways a little bit. You've got the newer generation who, by and large, mostly because the CFL's done a poor job of marketing itself, have grown up with the NFL, and then that was their introduction to football. And now they realize, oh, we've got actually CFL clubs in our hometown that we can have those in-game experiences and whatnot. So you can't keep relying on what got you to this point if you really want this league to succeed. Look at all the talk of expansion and let's get that 10th team out on the East Coast and all of that. Like, money coming into the league in whatever facet it is, whether it's public, whether it's private, whether it's whatever, right, is a good thing for the
Yeah.
league. So if you get some deep pocketed owners where I really think just putting aside the CFL for a second here, just sports in general, right? You've really seen that landscape shift almost where these billionaires and, multi millionaires are almost treating sports clubs as investment tools at this point,
Yeah.
right? You look at what Ryan Reynolds is doing with not only, the soccer team that he's purchased, but then also making a documentary about it. And then he's also just bought a stake in Alpine racing. And so like people are starting to diversify things and getting involved in ways that traditionally haven't always been. Right. And so it's not going to be some necessarily greasy, used car salesman empire or slumlord or anything like that that's going to come in and take over this franchise. It's probably going to be a consortium of deep pocketed people who have a much wider range and network than what's
Hmm.
currently available to the Elks. And that stability is really what this team is missing at this point, right? You look at the effect that BC had when they got, purchased in 2021, that all of their season attendance is up 30% from pre-pandemic levels, right?
Yeah.
You look at Montreal, you just said, well, talk about a great first year for new ownership. There you go, and you win the Grey Cup. But all of these things, when you have the right ownership in group, it opens the doors to so many more avenues. And the Atlanta Braves, there's just this huge piece in the Athletic, I think it was, where they're talking about not just the Atlanta Braves stadium, but the Battery, which is essentially all the shops and bars and restaurants and all of that around it, which the club actually owns as well too. They're already saying that like right now it's bringing in about 30% of the Braves total revenue, and they're expecting it to be 50-50 within probably the next 5 years. So forget the on-field butts in seats to come here and watch baseball get played. They're making money other ways. And so when you get these new ownership groups that come in, and maybe if they do move out of Commonwealth into a more football friendly atmosphere, new development, smaller capacity, but probably better suited for the CFL, there's so many more things that go into it that can really improve that in-game experience for the league, for the fans, and you get more money flowing in. Maybe all these talks of expansion finally start happening.
100%. And even just talking about the venue portion of it, you look at kind of where every team sits. Ottawa is a great in-game experience, newer venue, full grounds, right? Montreal, a little bit of an older venue, but they've got a lot of things around, right? They've got restaurants, they've got the university, they've got very scenic areas, and you can go for a walk around. Toronto, new venue. Hamilton, new venue. And then you go out west, sorry, Winnipeg, new venue. Saskatchewan, new venue. Now you look at those two teams that are in Edmonton and Calgary, and they're kind of trailing behind now, right? So that's kind of where the CFL is in flux, because do you want to invest all this new money coming in into potentially getting that 10th team out to diversify, the game across the country, or do we want to reinvest in potentially helping these clubs that are already participating in the league secure these new lands to build these new stadiums, right? So that's really a conversation that needs to be had. I think it's already been had at head office. So yeah, I think that this is a win-win for not only the city of Edmonton, but for the league itself. So hopefully, they don't have to go through the rigmarole of the same type of scenario that Montreal had to go through to find their perfect ownership group,
Yeah.
right? Potentially being sold and then falling through, and then selling it to a group, and then, oh well, they're not who they said they were going to be, and we're going to resell it to somebody else now. Let's just get it in the hands of the right person from the get-go and let them really mold it in their vision to really put things in place to get some stability out there, and really maybe kick Calgary in the butt now to say, all right, Edmonton's got their stuff together, they're getting on track with the 21st century. Now it's time for you guys in Calgary to make the same decision.
Yeah. And, it's also going to obviously have a trickle down effect to the roster and the on field product as well, too, because this is kind of a team that's paralyzed right now by not knowing what direction they're going to go into, right? They're hemorrhaging money, right? The losses are starting to mount here. They don't have the deep pockets to be able to say, like, all right, we're going to be able to continue to float this here until we get a new ownership group in. So they just keep kind of running back the same product, right? Like, you even look at their approaches to free agency and whatnot. They've been pretty tame compared to the banner years of when Edmonton was out there actually competing for Grey Cup championships and whatnot, right? Like Chris Jones, back to back 4 and 14 years. Like, if there was a deep pocketed owner, then he goes and trots out another third season like that. I would expect there to be change. If there's not ownership change, the league probably runs Chris Jones back for another year, right? So, like,
Yeah.
all of these things have a compounding effect. And until you sort out that ownership group, it's not all that unsimilar to what we're seeing play out in Ottawa, right? Like, how long that saga of where the estate is going to sell the team to, until you get that figured out, you can't figure out the GM, you can't figure out the coach, you can't figure out then the roster to then even start worrying about competing for a Grey Cup championship once again. So a lot of things need to get figured out there, which segues into our
Yeah.
next topic here as well too. Chief among them, who's going to be taking snaps week 1 for that Elks team?
Well, the reason why this is an interesting topic, and I'm kind of very apropos to starting out with the ownership change, because you look at where they've been building this club around, and since Chris Jones has come back into play, they've relied heavily on the American side of things, the non-imports, sorry, the imported players. So the biggest focus around any CFL club is always the quarterback. And recently, the assistant GM, G. Roy Simon, former teammate of mine, has come out and basically said that, Tre Ford, who was a first round pick of theirs 3 years ago, is not ready to handle the leadership of being a starting quarterback in the CFL. And it kind of, took a lot of people aback, because this is something where, one, you invested a first round pick in this gentleman, assuming that he was going to be the one to take you to that next level. But then also more confusing because, two, you see what he ended up doing for that team last year when they started out, and they were absolutely abysmal, right? They had the worst start in CFL history. Then you throw the kid in, and all of a sudden he starts making these plays that you don't really expect him to make. Well, now he's making them. Now they're winning these games. And I think he ended up with a plus 500 record at the end of the year as the starter. Now, obviously, we're not in the locker room. We don't see the kind of things that are being done in there. We don't see the kind of things that are being done in the community. But just when you hear something like that, it just kind of makes you wonder, is it because of some of these off the field things that really limit somebody's ability to lead on the field? Or is it a case of, well, they went out and signed McLeod Bethel Thompson, who was formerly a Grey Cup winning quarterback with the Toronto Argos, you know, do they want to show more of that American bias when it comes to who, steps on the field and takes the snaps, or is this an opportunity for them to say, okay, well, we see what you guys don't see. We're making it clear that Tre is our future and saying all the right things, but they're ultimately going to pull the rug from underneath him the first chance they get.
Yeah. Well, this is a situation which is playing out eerily similar to something just south of the border. Because when you look at Tre Ford's stats and Justin Fields' stats, they are nearly identical. All right. So Ford, 10 games. He had 2,069 passing yards, 12 TDs, 6 INTs, 622 yards rushing, 3 touchdowns. In 13 starts, Justin Fields, 2,502 yards passing, 16 TDs, 9 interceptions, 657 yards rushing, 4 TDs on the ground. If you go on a per game basis, Ford is actually better than Justin Fields statistically in 2023. So in both scenarios, with the Bears, you've got the shiny allure of, hey, we can pick whoever the heck we want and hit the reset button, and whether it's Caleb Williams or Drake May or whoever they end up taking there. In this one, it's, hey, we've got a Grey Cup winning quarterback here in MBT, and he's going to come in here and, maybe he can actually get us over the hump and we don't finish in last place in the West for the umpteenth year in a row here. So in both cases, it's, we know what we've got. We've got an uber athletic dual threat quarterback who can do things that offensive coordinators would kill to have in their system. But it's the allure of this shiny unknown. Hey, what's behind door number 2? Yeah, it could be anything, even another speedboat. Like it could really just, that allure seems to intrigue teams. And I think what it ultimately comes down to is, as good as Fields is, as good as Ford is, the dual threat quarterback is not a luxury that works for every offensive system here. And it takes a special kind of person to be able to actually integrate that well into their system. Because if you look, coming out of college, statistically and stylistically, was there a huge difference between Vince Young and Lamar Jackson? Some would argue, hey, Vince Young was probably the more polished product. And look what happened with his career. And Lamar goes on to win 2 MVPs, right? So the line with a dual threat quarterback is so much finer than it is with the traditional, hey, 6'5" pocket passer. We know what we've got. Because anyone who's ever even played a game of Madden football before knows how to run a system with the, okay, I'm going to take my drops back and then I'm going to find the open wide receiver. Scheming up plays for someone who might actually be a better runner than your actual running back that you've got in your backfield there is a little bit trickier. So to me, the question isn't, is Ford talented? It's, what are we doing to surround him for a system for him to thrive? And it sounds like, and again, whether this is an effect of not having an ownership group in there to kind of set the marching orders and, hey, this is our vision. Look at this star that's kind of landed in our laps here. Like, let's take advantage of it. They're kind of deferring to the coaches here. And I think that coaching staff is obviously much more comfortable with the traditional pocket passer, which is an MBT. And as a result, you're now looking for reasons to, as you said, look what he did down the stretch, right? Any fan who watched the first half of the season of Elks, which was largely unwatchable, so kudos to you if you actually did tune into those games, versus the second half, it's night and day. So the answer's obvious to them. Ford is our guy until proven otherwise. But now you're seeing kind of that, I don't want to say smear campaign, but you're starting to see, right? We're poking holes in the, oh, well, he can't do this well. And, oh, Bethel Thompson does this better than him, right? So I really think they're trying to talk themselves into MBT being the guy, but it's not because of anything that Ford has necessarily done, at least on the field of play. Like you said, who knows what's going on in the locker room? Who knows what's going on behind the scenes? If there's genuine concerns that come out later, hey, there's an argument to be made, and I retract my opinion. But if we're just talking about strictly on-field play, it's getting a bit of a rough ride out there out west.
Yeah, 100%. And I think the most troubling part of this is that when they came out and made these statements, they said, well, we just don't feel it's fair for him to, step into this role because he wasn't afforded the opportunity to learn from a veteran, right? And to me, that's taking such an easy way out of this and deflecting a lot of the attention away from the coaching staff, because that's your job as a coach. What's the quarterback coach doing? What's the offensive coordinator doing? What's the head coach doing? You're the ones who are going to be implementing the system, implementing the culture, and making sure that all the players that you bring in, and again, this is the group that drafted him,
Yeah.
you made this decision to bring him in. So now that you're saying, well, we're going to backtrack on, giving him the keys because he wasn't afforded the luxury of learning from, a real veteran before. So, okay, thanks to the guys who played for us last year, because obviously they didn't do shit. You're just going to throw them under the bus. And now we're going to, just take all the pressure off of ourselves. That's your job as a coach.
Yeah.
And I mean, you hear that all the time from coaches who don't want to actually do what they're paid to do, which is actually coach a player.
Yeah.
They're not finished products when they come to the league. This is a guy you knew was going to be a project, but he's an exciting project. You don't take a guy like Tre Ford unless you have a plan built for him. I look at what he offers as opposed to McLeod Bethel Thompson. I think that Tre Ford is the absolute obvious choice 9 times out of 10. And there's that one chance where he's not the choice, and that's exactly what we're talking about, which is the off-field stuff, right? Now, from everything that I've heard, look, he's a smart kid, went to Waterloo, has a degree from there. You don't get degrees from Waterloo willy-nilly. So let's take that off the table, because obviously he's intelligent enough. I've never heard of him getting in trouble. Have you?
Well, I'm not super connected to the Edmonton police force out there, though my sources have said he's been all right.
But again, like, you look at all of these things. So let's take that off the table. So character, check. Intelligence, check. Locker room, there's the thing that we don't that's the thing that we don't understand. So unless someone has come out and said, you know what, he's an absolute, nightmare in the locker room. He's like, second coming of Johnny Manziel or Caleb Williams or whatever it is, where his attitude's gotten too big for the room. There's no other excuse for this. So this to me just screams, look, you have a chance to do something different that no other CFL team has taken the chance of doing in a long, long time, which is getting a Canadian kid back there, slinging the rock, and making plays happen on a daily basis. BC had a guy for less than 1 season, and look at how it changed the fortune of their franchise in Nathan Rourke, right? You've got this kid in-house who you drafted, and this is the fine line that they're walking, okay? Because now, last year of his rookie contract, right? McLeod Bethel Thompson only signed for 1 year. So you might say, yeah, and Bethel Thompson's our guy for now. Ford's our future. Who's to say that he's going to come back?
Yeah.
Right? So you guys better be careful of how you handle the situation, because this could blow up in your face where you don't have either of these guys returning next year, and then you're doing the whole thing all over again.
Yeah. Well, that's just it, right? It's the classic case of, do you reward what you have already seen, or are you going to try and go on past returns and hope that MBT is still the guy that you signed him to be? Because if not, if he's even a step below what we saw out of him last time he was on the field, you're in a world of trouble here, right? Because you run the risk of, not only does he say, screw it, I'm going to go out and sign with, another team here. Hey, there's some more leagues down south of the border, and it might not even be the NFL, but maybe it's going to end up being like, well, you know what, Dwayne the Rock Johnson, you guys seem like you guys have your lives together a little bit better than Chris Jones and company out here, so I'm going to go play for whatever, the Brahmas or whatever organizations they've got going on these days. But it's going to be really interesting to see how this ultimately plays out. Is this something that they're using as just a motivation technique of like, hey, in the back of our minds, we're going to kind of still know that he's the guy, but he could benefit from having a, fire lit under him and bring in some competition, and, oh, I don't know if you're the starter, right? And maybe that brings out the best in him. But if you overplay that hand, right, you turn into Washington, who had RG3 and Kirk Cousins, and then they had no one, right? Yeah. So it can go sideways in a hurry, and they're playing with a little bit of fire here, in my opinion.
No, 100%. And I think they're not playing with it. They're dancing in the fire right now. So, but again, this is what franchises do when they feel pressure on themselves. They start making these decisions that are like, you know what, we're going all in here, and that's what we're going to ride or die with. So I think that's kind of what we see with that, being the case. But I mean, last thing I'll say on it, if I'm Hamilton, I'm licking my chops
Yeah.
at bringing this kid in as our franchise quarterback because one, local guy from Niagara Falls, he's 45 minutes away. Two, look, Hamilton has not been the most fortuitous franchise in CFL, right? What a chance for them to bring the hometown kid back to take over for the failed Bo Levi Mitchell experience if he doesn't perform this year and kind of reset that quarterback button and kind of take them to that next level. And again, sell out that stadium with the local kid. So last thing I'll say on that.
I just don't understand what the internal pressure here is, right? Like you were 4-14 last year. You're not on the cusp of all of a sudden competing for a championship here, right? Like bringing in Bethel Thompson and handing him the keys is the move you make if you were expected to go deep last year and you fizzled out in the first round because, hey, the kid wasn't ready, right? The moment got too big for him in the playoffs. You guys didn't even sniff a playoff spot last year. If anything, you groom the kid so that he can continue to have future success with this team. So I just don't understand it. It seems like a case of left hand's not talking to the right hand. And, what I said yesterday is a completely different opinion than what I have today. But I mean, we can continue along with the Canadian gridiron stories here because actually local product here out of Ottawa, Mr. Neville Gallimore is changing jerseys south of the border, going from Dallas to Miami, which as an Eagles fan delights me to no end to be able to. I was always 95% in support of him, but now I can go 100% in support of Mr. Gallimore.
No, and I think it's such a good fit too for everything that Miami is trying to kind of repurpose on their defense, right? I mean, you lose Christian Wilkins, which is obviously a big loss. But then you bring in a guy like Neville, who, by all intents and purposes, great run stopper, big, three technique in the middle of that defense who can slide over to the 1 or 0 in a pinch. But, this is a guy who works his ass off. He's athletic, he's strong, he's talented, he's smart. And for what you got him for, I mean, $1.8 million, which is fully guaranteed. I mean, that's peanuts compared to what he's going to give you each and every week. So,
especially when you look at both sides of interior linemen, what they were getting paid this offseason as well, too.
Yeah. And I mean, the fact of the matter is that, Neville's the type of player that I think could fit in so many different schemes. So the versatility that he brings is, very rare in today's NFL. Everybody's always specialized, right? Neville, you could put out there 3 downs and he could, move around the defense. Like I was saying, he could play a 3, he could play a 1, he could play 0. Hell, if you play a 34, you can line him up at edge and have him play a 5 technique for all that matters. So I think that it's exciting because one, I think Miami is so close to taking that next step up. So great opportunity for a guy like him to go on a 1-year prove it deal down there and really kind of set himself up for success because ultimately you get overshadowed in a defense like Dallas because obviously a lot of success there. Dan Quinn, great coordinator, moved on to be the head coach in Washington. You've got a lot of these high profile players like Parsons and Diggs, Van Der Esch, who just recently retired. You kind of get lost in the shuffle there.
Yeah.
Right? Now I think is a chance for him to kind of breathe that fresh air now, go to a new opportunity where there's a big gaping hole that you can fill with Christian Wilkins leaving. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's such a great fit, great kid, great coaching staff down there. And I think, I heard the weather in Miami is pretty good too. So, don't know if that was a factor or not.
Yeah, it's a little kinder than it is in Ottawa, that's for sure. But I mean, it's a great fit for him because obviously this is a team who's got championship aspirations here. They seem to be, a couple pieces away still, and we'll see how the draft obviously plays out for him and what happens in the lead up to training camps. But I like it from the simple standpoint that here's a kid who's 27 years old, signs a 1-year prove it deal. great situation to land in terms of Wilkins. All of those snaps on the defensive side wide open right now, right? Like
Mhm.
Benito Jones coming in, Brandon Peely is kind of who he's up against for that defensive tackle starting job. And even if he's not starter, anything is going to be more than the kind of rotational piece that he largely was with
Mhm.
Dallas, right? So a great opportunity for him to go down there, ball out for one season, and then hit the market again as a 28-year-old who, hey, still on the right side of 30. And if he goes out there and proves that, hey, all I needed was increased usage, he could be looking at a very hefty payday as well too. So it's great for a ton of reasons, but one of them that probably shouldn't be overlooked as well too is, coach Anthony Weaver, who is their defensive line coach for the Dolphins, has been churning out some pretty high end defensive linemen and is kind of known as a D-line whisperer amongst football circles. So
Yeah.
you're going to be going into a system where you've got someone who, we just talked about the Elks, who the coaches might not be coaching up their players like they should be. This is an individual who definitely is, and you've seen the products that have come out of there in recent years, right? Like look at Jalen Phillips and how he completely
Yeah.
revitalized his career after being like a so-so prospect, right? But no one expected him to go out there and have the season he did until he obviously got injured. But this is a real opportunity for him. And I really think that you could be hearing the name Neville Gallimore quite a bit more in 2024 than you did in 2023, even going from America's team to a quasi smaller market in Miami.
Yeah. 100%. And I mean, uber athletic 320-pound guys don't grow on trees.
No.
So the fact that he's there in a high octane defense now with a coach like an Anthony Weaver, it just has all the recipe for success for him. And I mean, you talk about that big payday. Look, he goes out there and puts up, between 3 to 6 sacks, can get in the backfield for, double digit tackles for loss, can, get around the 30 to 40 tackle, mark. Those are good numbers for a defensive tackle in today's NFL. If he can go out and do that and replicate some of those numbers on a successful team, because we know Miami's going to win some games next year.
Yeah.
He goes out and does that. That's his retirement contract right there, right?
Yeah.
He signs, for a 3 or 4 year deal after that, right up into the sunset on that last contract, maybe get another one after that. But this is really such a good opportunity, like we've been talking about. And I really hope the best for him because, like I said, he's such a great kid. Had the, had the pleasure of knowing him, had the misfortune of coaching against him, and honestly, it's going to be such a great thing to watch because there's so much Ottawa talent that's littering the NFL now, and I think Neville's kind of the poster child for that because he was really the one leading the charge with the high profile, going down and playing at Oklahoma, being a third round pick in the NFL, and now being the first one to hit free agency. So we're anxious. We're looking forward to seeing what he can do in Miami this year.
Yeah. Yeah. It'll definitely look better in teal than he did in Dallas blue. That's for sure. Switching over to the hockey rink for a little bit there. You want to
Yeah.
talk about people that have landed in good places. Well, Sidney Crosby is currently on a bit of an island out there in Pittsburgh these days, and not too sure what the future holds for Sid the Kid, but he's getting long in the tooth, and it's going to be interesting to see what happens with him moving forward, with Pittsburgh seemingly falling further and further out of playoff contention as we speak.
This is such a weird scenario because you've got this team that went out and kind of invested in all these veterans to bring in, surround a guy like Sidney Crosby in that core with Malkin and Letang to make that one last push with this veteran group, right? You bring in an Eric Carlson, you kind of reinvest in some of the third, fourth line guys. And it just hasn't worked out for them this year. And I think you see the body language for the first time in Sidney Crosby's career kind of be on that downside of things, right?
Yeah.
Usually he's upbeat, he's unflappable, he's always, the first one to talk to the media, first one to be out in the community, and he deflects things better than anybody in the NHL. And I think you're seeing more of the emotions kind of come out on his sleeve this year, especially after that Jake Gensel trade, right? I think he had just gotten so close with Gensel. And, again, you get a team telling you that they're going all in, and then they make that trade, and it's like, well, what are we doing?
Yeah.
Right? Like, are we going all in or are we not? So it's an interesting spot because I think this is the first time that anyone's ever questioned whether Sidney Crosby's best years remaining are going to be in Pittsburgh or somewhere else.
Yeah.
You're hearing a lot of these rumors, obviously, with the trade deadline just passing. Hey, Colorado kicked the tires on bringing him in to reunite him with Nathan McKinnon, right? They've had a lot of chemistry playing, at world championships and whatnot before. And I think obviously with that local tie that he's got, I think that would have been a good fit. But I mean, Sidney Crosby brings so much more with him than just the talent that he has on the ice, that it has to be a right scenario, right? And obviously he's got some term left on his deal. It would have to be a trade. Kyle Dubas, people can, either be one side on Kyle Dubas or the other side on Kyle Dubas. Does he know what he's doing? Or is he just kind of a victim? Is he kind of a,
mastermind of his own promotional success here?
I was just going to say, or is he just a victim of circumstances? Let's put it that way.
Is he a genius or an idiot savant?
Yeah. And this is the question. So, is it really striking a lot of confidence in a guy like Sidney Crosby? Because again, you see the moves that they're making, and now he's recently come out as of yesterday and said, "No, we're all in. We're building around this team. We still have another run, with this core, and this is what we're going to do." Okay, well, that's not the message you gave when you were at the trade deadline, right? So, there's a lot of confusion that's being put out in the public, and I think a lot of the players are confused. So it's going to be an interesting offseason to see what a lot of these veteran guys end up doing, like Malkin, Letang. Are they going to retire? Does Erik Karlsson ask for a trade to go somewhere else? Like, what's going to happen with that core? And ultimately, I think that's what's going to influence whether Crosby's gone or he's donning another jersey at the end of his career.
Yeah. Well, I mean, PK Subban went on the big rant about Dubas there, where it's like, well, apparently all you just need to do is just put on a pair of glasses and you're the smartest person in the room, right?
That was funny. I like that.
So we're gonna really see what Kyle Dubas is as a GM kind of moving forward, right? To be in the media market that he was in Toronto, it takes a special kind of person. So he's definitely got some of that inherent ability and knows what it takes to lead a franchise to perennial playoff contention. Playoff success has largely eluded him, obviously, but we're going to see really what his chops are as a general manager working with the Pittsburgh Penguins. It's easy to do when you inherit a franchise that has bottomed out and you get the first overall pick and, oh, look at this, Austin Matthews is going to come score 50 goals a season for me every single year, and make some smart draft picks and developments and all that, as far as getting Marner and Nylander in there, take some big swings, Tavares, and trying to keep him in Toronto and all of that. All of that pales in comparison to the challenge of aging roster locked up to term that all kind of have no movement clauses, and they kind of dictate, how they are going to proceed with the next couple seasons of their career. You mentioned Colorado, which I found super ironic, because the case I was going to make is, are we going to see Sidney Crosby be Ray Bourque? Right? Go and play his entire career with one franchise, but clearly by the end of it, and whether it's, next season or 3 seasons from now, right? Do we reach that breaking point of, hey, it's going to be weird to see you in another jersey, but let's flip you out there for one last run at Lord Stanley's Cup? I really think that, yeah, and you can see, right? Like, he's already more than a point a game a player. He's got 68 points in 67 games. So it's not like we're talking about a declining asset. Is he going to go out there and put up 120 points a season? No. But is he still one of the best two-way centers in the game? As of right now, yes.
Yeah.
Right? Don't know when that's going to fall off a cliff. Father Time remains undefeated. But this is, to your point, kind of the first time we've seen him get as riled up as Sidney Crosby gets in an interview, when he's kind of saying, like, I don't know, you got to ask them, that's on them, I don't know what we're doing here. That's about as, belligerent as Mr. Roboto captain there is going to be in terms of the press. I really think that you're going to see some tough conversations had this offseason. And do I think there's going to be sweeping change? No. I think by and large, you're going to see the usual cast of characters come back and they're still going to be in black and yellow come start of next season. But I think there's going to be, especially in those exit interviews, and it wouldn't even surprise me if, Letang, Malkin, and Crosby were like, hey, we're going to do a joint interview and the three of us are going to sit down and you're going to tell us what the heck your plan is here, right? Because if you're just going to continue selling off the limited assets beyond the three of us that you really have, it's going to be something that we need to take into consideration with, do we want to keep running it back and putting our body on the line? We've made untold millions up to this point. Do we kind of start planning our exit strategy now? So there's going to be some real interesting conversations that happen that I would love to be a fly on the wall when
Mhm.
they happen. But do I think that we're going to see sweeping change next season? No. Do I see if anyone gets moved? Maybe it's Carlson, right? You've already kind of heard the scuttlebutt of, oh, Ottawa could bring him back, but Carlson's already even said, and that's the Canadian media for you, right? Like, whether he's downplaying that or not, for those that don't know, his wife's from Ottawa here, right? They've
Yeah.
got a lot of connections beyond just, oh, this is the team that drafted me.
Mhm.
So there is a chance he's kind of downplaying it, but out of anyone that gets moved as far as a major piece, I think it's Carlson. I would be pretty shocked if it was one of their kind of core three at the end of the day.
Yeah, and this is something that you see a lot, with these teams that have been together for so long and had these long runs. You just saw Chicago kind of blow up their championship dynasty,
Yeah.
right, a few years ago. Kane was kind of the last little domino to fall in that whole thing. Pittsburgh, I don't think, is that far away from doing the same thing. You've already jettisoned a lot of these players, right? And at the end of the day, do you want to keep hanging on for one more year, and set yourself back? Because every year that you hang on for, you're setting yourself back 3 or 4.
Yeah.
So what's that multiplier going to be adding up to at the end of the day? If you really want to say, yeah, we're going to run with you guys until the end of your term, and then we're going to reset the clock, right?
Mhm.
That's how teams become bad. That's how the Islanders went from being a dynasty to the laughing stock of the NHL for 20 plus years,
Mhm.
right? That's how the Edmonton Oilers went from a dynasty to being the laughing stock of the NHL until Connor McDavid came along, right? You cannot hang on to the past before the future hits you in the face, right? And that's the really big conundrum that a lot of these clubs face. And is Kyle Dubas the type of GM that has the stones to really tackle this situation? I don't think so, because like you mentioned, it's easy when you come in and people can say, well, Toronto, the media there and the market, it kills you. Yes, however, the expectations were so low when he came in that he could have just made the playoffs, and that's exceeding expectations, right? But then you have an Austin Matthews fall in your lap. You hit on a few players like a Marner, like a Nylander. But now Pittsburgh doesn't have that luxury.
Mhm.
You're not picking, first overall that we know of. You don't
There
have.
could be some frozen envelopes going on
Yeah,
here.
who knows? Who knows how that works? The last time this happened, Crosby ended up in Pittsburgh. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, this is a situation where you inherit a veteran, very cap heavy team, and that takes a lot of finagling. And we mentioned Ken Holland last week with his masterful work at the trade deadline, working around that salary cap to bring in pieces that are going to help that team. That's what good GMs do, right? What's Kyle Dubas going to do to maneuver around these salary cap issues that he has? Yeah, trading away Jake Gensel's a start, but he didn't get anything back for him,
Mhm.
right?
I got his
Well,
buddy Bunting back there, where it's like,
yeah,
oh, okay, we're getting the band back together, I
yeah,
guess. But
yeah. So, but here's another thing too. Do you have the coach in place that's going to be, the one to lead this new charge of veteran slash, entry level contract rookies? We don't know, because that's what you're going to be running with next year
Mhm.
unless you make these sweeping changes. So, yeah, I'd be interested to see. I think that this is really going to determine whether Dubas is there, not next year, but the year after.
Yeah.
Because if he comes back and doesn't do the things that he really needs to, which in my mind is blow it up, well, now you're saying, well, we can win with this team, and ownership, has to believe your message, or else they're not going to keep you. So if you convince ownership that we can run it back with this program, and you're going to roll out the same group with less talent, well, sorry to say, guys, you play in a tough division. It ain't getting any easier.
Yeah. First of all, before I get to my point here, I would like to applaud your use of last week it was big words. This week you've got finagling, rigmarole. You're just
Yeah,
busting out all the interesting vernacular. So, but it's really going to come down to, right? Like you said, I don't think that Dubas is going to have a super long leash, because there are a few players in the entire sport whose opinion carries as much weight as Sidney Crosby's does.
yeah,
So if he goes to ownership after next season and goes, it's me or him, sorry, Dubas, you and your
yeah.
spectacles are heading back north of the border. So it's going to be a very critical off season, and those exit interviews are going to be super important, because this is not a team that is in the same boat, even though they came into the league at the same time that the Washington Capitals are in with Alex Ovechkin, right?
Right.
With them, the ownership's already come out like, listen, if we need to trot out a 50-year-old OV, he's breaking Gretzky's record. He's going to be
Yeah.
wearing a Capitals jersey when he does it, and then he can hang up the skates on his turn. The fact that they've now somehow snuck into playoff contention, I think, is surprising even most Capitals fans at this point. But they at least have kind of a direction as far as
Mhm.
they know, like, all right, there's a timeline to this, and as soon as X happens, we're in full scale rebuild. And that, I think, is what is missing with what's going on with Pittsburgh right now.
Mhm.
What is the plan, Dubas? Are you contending? Are you tearing down and retooling on the fly? Are you full on fire sale in the offseason? Like, it just seems like, we've spent a ton of time talking about the Senators not having a plan. It seems to be kind of rampant around the league, where there's more than a few GMs who might think they're the smartest person in the room, but instead of it being, hey, we're playing chess while you guys are playing checkers, it's more like, well, you're playing with half a set of Monopoly over in the corner while the rest of us are playing a completely different board game altogether. So I think that's what's missing at this point, is a lack of a plan, and a lack of a plan that's been passed on and vocalized to that veteran player group.
Yeah. Yeah. And, that's at the end of the day what really matters. I mean, we mentioned it, I don't know how many times. Being in this position is not easy. Making these decisions is not easy. Do you want to be the kind of GM that does right by the players, or do you want to be the kind of GM that builds a team that wins championships?
Mhm.
Right? I mean, you look at the Justin Fields trade that just happened to Pittsburgh. Oh, well, they had four better offers on the table. We wanted to do right by Justin Fields. Well, that's all fine and good. And as a Pittsburgh fan, trust me, I'm more than happy that you want to do right by the player. But if I'm ownership looking at that GM, I'm like, okay, but why are you doing right by a player who's not going to be playing for us anymore? Because you screwed this up so badly leading up to this,
Yeah.
right?
I would love for someone to do some sort of long ranging study of how have teams benefited by doing right by the player in the long term. Because I
Yeah.
think it's a lot of lip service in terms of, all right, well, I just, I have a relationship with this player. I
Mm,
personally don't want to put him in a bad situation because I like Steve, or in this case, I like Justin, right?
yeah.
I want to be able to say hi to him in the hallway and we're still buddy buddy. How has a franchise actually benefited from these doing right by the players, right? The perfect example is, Jenny Buss out there for the Los Angeles Lakers largely said, the reason that we're handing out these contracts to people like Kobe, people like LeBron at the tail end of their careers, is we want to send the message that, we do right by the players and we'll take care of you even afterwards. It's like, okay, cool. That's just a word salad for saying that, hey, we are one of the most storied franchises in the league that plays in Los Angeles, the media market capital of the United States, and it's sunny 360 days a year out here. Like, cool. Doing right by the players is just a fancy way of saying we hit the lottery in terms of where our stadium is built. So
Yeah.
doing right by the player, I would love to see someone put together a list of like, we did A and look at all the benefits that happened to us down the road, because I don't think they exist.
Yeah. And I mean, that's not to say, look, I was a player at one point. I know a lot of guys who were players. I know a lot of guys who are players. I know a lot of guys who are coaches. Know a lot of guys who are GMs. It's again, it's not easy. You have to have been, you have to have gone through it in order to understand what it's like. Now, I'll just kind of give you the situation that I ran into, and you'll people will question all the time, like, well, how in the hell can you still love the game of football after this? Listen, when I hurt my knee, I tore the whole thing. I had to have a complete reconstruction done. In my head, I knew I was never going to play football again. But until you hear it and someone tells you you absolutely cannot play football again, you're going to keep trying, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what happened was, this is how I got cut. I'm going to tell you a story of how I got cut. So I had signed a 3-year contract with a 4th-year player option. Okay. It was at the end of the first year, had my surgery, started was doing my rehab. I had moved back home after the season was done, just to kind of, rest, rehab, all that kind of thing, save a little bit of money.
Thinking all the scenic Sudbury
Of
landscape there
course.
that,
Yeah, of course.
got to see it.
Good.
Palm trees and beaches.
Got to go back home to see palm trees and beaches, aka rock and rock. Um, but I represented myself, so I didn't have an agent. So I maintained constant communication with the front office, followed up with the assistant GM, and said, hey, just want to know what the plan is for when I'm coming back. My rehab's going well. Want to get back with you guys so that way I can, go on your program, yada, 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 things that you have to do. And this was probably started December, like right after the Grey Cup had happened.
Mm-hmm.
And a couple of weeks went by, I didn't hear a thing. So it's like, okay, this is weird, but whatever. Maybe they're just, planning on, getting everybody together and doing all that kind of thing. I got an email on Christmas Eve. Okay. And it says, hey, great to hear from you. Glad to hear rehab's going well. Just to let you know that we've officially terminated your contract.
Merry
Yeah,
Christmas.
exactly. So, I mean, you think about that, and I mean, you talk about being bitter. I mean, I wanted to kill people because, like, it was, as an athlete who's a prideful person, you always want, the best thing to happen to you, right? And I mean, could they have done right by me and said, yeah, we'll bring you back and we'll put you through, rehab, we'll put you on, long-term IR, so that way we can give you the chance to come back, right? That would have been doing right by me. At the end of the day, when I look back at the situation, about a month or two later, I understood why they did what they did. And I moved on.
Mm-hmm.
And, look, I'm wearing, the shirt to this day. Like, they're always going to have a fond place in my heart because they're the ones who gave me the opportunity to become a professional football player and live my dream, right? And after getting to know the people there, it made sense. Like, why would you keep somebody who's got like a less than 1% chance of ever getting back to playing, let alone playing at the high level that they were used to playing at,
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to, oh, hey, let's bring a guy up from the States. Let's draft a rookie this year and give them an opportunity instead of keeping this gimp around who can't, do the things he was supposed to do. So that's what I think a lot of people kind of, the misconception lies, is that just because you don't do right by the player, well, guess what? People move on.
Mm-hmm.
Feelings mend, right?
Yeah.
Wounds heal. Like, that's the type of thing that you need to understand. And when you're getting involved in professional sports, this is the unfortunate reality of it. People will move on. They'll get over this kind of thing. So whether you're getting cut, whether you're getting traded, whether you're, not being re-signed or brought back, listen, people understand. So instead of doing right by the player, which again, I was one, I've been a coach, I've been a manager, you have to do what's best for the program, because the program is what signs your checks. The program is what allows you to bring food home and put a roof over your kids and family's head. So
And I,
that's all. Go ahead.
And I think that's where a lot of people don't see the delineation of the two in terms of here's what is right for the fan base, the roster, the payroll, the whatever it is, the franchise in general. Doing the right decision is still paramount to your success as a franchise. That doesn't mean you have to be a dick and email people on Christmas Eve and tell them that they're cut, right? You can still arrive at the same conclusion in a humane way. And I think that's where when people are like, well, we gotta do right by the player. It's like you can get to the same conclusion, but you just don't need to be so ridiculous about it. There's a humane way to go about it. I'm glad you enjoyed that there. I feel like this is a cathartic experience.
Oh my god! No, because it's 100% right. But I mean, at the end of the day, if you can't laugh at yourself, who can you laugh at? Anyways, that was good. I enjoyed that.
Yeah. But right, like you can do right by the player, but at the same time, guess what, Justin Fields, if I'm getting a third rounder out of Seattle or whoever,
Yeah.
and I'm getting a conditional sixth out of Pittsburgh,
You're a Seahawk, man.
you like Pittsburgh better. I
Yeah.
don't care. Like, I'm not sending you to Siberia. You're a professional athlete still. I'm sending you to one of 32 clubs on the planet who can afford you this opportunity. I'm not banishing you to the gulag at this point.
Yeah.
Like, get over it.
And you know, that's 100% accurate. And like in the case of Sidney Crosby, obviously he's earned a little bit of, you know, respect from that franchise with everything that he's given them. So I mean, including him and his agent in those conversations obviously should happen. But like you're saying, you have to have a midline somewhere.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, look, I know I'm giving you a no trade clause, but you got to work with me here. Right? Like if you really cared about this franchise as much as you say you do, you'll reciprocate some of that do right by the franchise as we're reciprocating to you of doing right by the player.
Yeah. You want an 8-foot statue outside the stadium when all is said and done?
Yeah.
Give me 5 options here. You only want a 6-footer. You tell me where you're going. We'll adjust the amount of bronze we use here.
Yeah. Well, and you know, and that's the funny thing because, you know, this talk about Crosby being traded obviously brings you back to, you know, the Gretzky trade, you know, back in the 80s. And when you listen to some of the stories, I mean, Wayne Gretzky should have been a Vancouver Canuck. He should have been a Detroit Red Wing. Mm-hmm. But they said, Wayne, where do you want to go? And Wayne's like, well, my wife is a Hollywood actress. Like, obviously, Los Angeles is the place I want to be. So let's make something work there. So, I mean, that's a scenario where it's like, look, it worked out well for both teams because I think they both got something out of that because Edmonton went on to win another cup the year after with what they got back. And Gretzky obviously put hockey in the States on the map. Right? Like that's why we have this big boon, and Gary Bettman is just frothing at the mouth for the next American franchise to pop up and whatnot because of the Gretzky effect. So if you can get a situation like that, then obviously that just kind of makes it easier to stomach the loss of a great player like that. I don't know if you're going to have the same scenario play out with Pittsburgh and Sidney Crosby, and hopefully not, because I mean, if anybody who's seen the documentary about the Gretzky trade knows that there were some hurt feelings. You know, on both sides of it, there's some death threats on both sides, but I mean, this is a scenario where you do right by the player, you minimize the return back for your franchise. You work with the player, you maximize the return for both sides. Mm-hmm. So there's a difference: do right or work with. I want to work with you. I don't want to do right by you.
Well, who knows? Maybe Dubas is just waiting for the next generational talent to come up in the draft there because they went right from Lemieux to Crosby. So they're just waiting for, you know, some 15-year-old kid to 3 years from now. They're ready to roll at that point. But
what's the kid's name out west? Bedard's cousin, who's like lighting the league on fire.
Yeah, it escapes me right now. It's something really short, I'm pretty sure. Isn't it like Micey or Mazzy or something like that?
I don't know. Whoever the kid is, he's good. So.
Hey. But Bedard DNA, that guy out west. But I mean, we covered a lot of things tonight, but it is the start of a fairly large tournament down south of the border. So before we signed off, did want to give a shout out. We've got 42 Canadians taking part in March Madness. And this year, evenly split down the middle, 21 men, 21 women. So big golf clap to all our Canadian athletes taking part in NCAA over the next couple weeks.
Absolutely. Good luck to each and every one of you. I mean, obviously, this is the most exciting time of college basketball, and I think for a lot of gamblers as well. So, all the best, all you degenerates out there who are going to waste millions and millions of dollars. But at the end of the day, I think that yeah, what we're going to see out of these athletes is kind of unprecedented, because I don't think you've ever anticipated the women's tournament as much as you are this year.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the men's tournament still has a lot of these stars where people are still going to be tuning in, right? So I think the viewership numbers you're going to see on both sides is going to be absolutely fantastic. But
fun fact of the day: currently, right now, for standing room or nosebleed only tickets, women's Final Four, $472, men's $395. So guess what? You get a Caitlin Clark versus LSU or some big showdown.
South
UConn
Carolina
goes on a run. Oh, buddy, they're gonna outdraw the men's side because there's no star power this year. This is going to be one of those NBA drafts where you're going to see a lot of who the heck is this guy whose name is getting called.
Solid players.
Solid players, but there's no, this isn't the Ja Morant, Zion Williamson, RJ Barrett draft class by any stretch of the imagination here.
Yeah.
So best of luck to all the men and women down south of the border, and we'll see if our towering national team players Zach Edey and Purdue can finally get over the hump this season.